Rain rattled the tin roof while a single bulb stuttered over a rusted cage. Ash crouched small, breath fogging the bars with each sharp exhale. Derek said quiet, and his voice scraped like the hinge on the door. A puddle carried cold from the concrete into Ash's paws. The room smelled of gasoline, bleach, and old fear. Somewhere a siren wailed, then thinned to a distant thread. Ash pressed his face to the bars and flinched at his own reflection. Derek said, "You keep it up, and you'll learn." The bulb flickered and shadows crawled like insects across the walls. Ash tried to tuck the torn ear beneath his foreleg, as if hiding could make it whole. His tail trembled in short bursts he could not control. Derek kicked the bucket, and water lapped the cage with a hollow slap. Ash steadied, counting heartbeats the way storms count seconds to thunder. Morning never arrived here, only thinner darkness and the smell of stale coffee. Derek ate standing up, eyes on a silent TV, while the cage scraped the floor with any small move. Derek said, "This is on you," as if blame could fill a bowl. Ash tasted rust and counted the spaces between footsteps. The house groaned like a bored witness refusing to speak. Derek said, "You make a mess, you sit in it." A fly traced lazy circles above the waterline, then vanished into the lamp's heat. Ash pressed his whiskers to the corner and held still. Hunger spoke louder than fear, but fear had the longer echo. Somewhere a neighbor's door thudded and boots went down wet stairs. Derek sniffed, checked his phone, and smiled at nothing. Ash blinked slow, a wordless plea that died against iron. The latch had a memory, and Ash studied it the way storms study trees. He nudged the bar with a careful paw, then pushed harder until the metal barked. Derek said, "Hey," from the other room, voice heavy with warning. The bar flexed, then refused. Ash tried again, claws slipping and singing against rust. Derek said, "Don't even think about it." The air tightened as if the walls were holding their breath. Ash slid his shoulder into the seam and felt the bruise bloom. A drop of blood smeared the hinge like a guilty signature. Derek stepped close, and his shadow crossed the cage like an eclipse. Ash froze, heart beating against iron, waiting for the sky to move again. Silence flipped, and a soft sound threaded the room, a thin mew seeping from the vent. Ash turned, and hope pricked like a thorn beneath the skin. Derek said rats, and kicked the wall without looking. The mew stopped, then returned, smaller and stubborn. The bulb hummed and wrote pale rings on the floor. Ash settled near the vent and let his breath slow to a promise. No one else in the house noticed the tiny pulse of life. Derek said, "If it's vermin, it'll learn." Ash blinked toward the grill, sharing steady breath through cold metal. Outside, rain softened to a hush, as if the street had leaned in to hear. The house settled as the storm drifted east, leaving the roof to sigh in relief. Derek locked the inner door, and the click rang like a verdict. Derek said, "Behave," to the room, then walked away whistling a tune with no melody. Ash closed his eyes and pictured a window he had never seen. The vent whispered, and the quiet voice returned, brave and thin. Ash edged closer, pressing warmth to the cold grill. Somewhere a car started, and the garage swallowed its echo. Ash said nothing, but his stillness spoke to the small life in the wall. The bulb steadied, and the shadows rested their claws. Hope held the room as gently as hands might hold a match. Ash opened his eyes to find the morning dimmer than memory allowed. The garage smelled of wet rust, and every surface wore yesterday's sorrow. Derek said, "Eat if you want," tossing scraps like punishment rather than care. Ash pressed against the bars, ears tilted back, stomach pulling at him with empty claws. A pigeon outside cooed, its sound drifting through cracks like a story from another world. Ash said nothing, but his gaze carried words louder than any cry. Derek muttered, "Ungrateful thing," as if pain could be disguised as discipline. The floor drank every drop spilled from the dented bowl, leaving only reflection. Ash stretched his paw, tracing a line in dust that vanished when his claws lifted. A whisper rose again from the vent, soft and steady, and Ash leaned closer, remembering that someone else was listening. The world outside was painted in silver rain, but Ash had only the drip through the ceiling for proof. He licked a paw, grimacing at rust and dust clinging like memory. Derek said, "No one wants you," with a smirk too sharp to forget. Ash's gaze dropped, not from shame, but from the heavy weight of truth carried too long. The vent pulsed with a softer sound, a tiny mew echoing like a fragile bell. Ash lifted his head, and for a moment the room shifted into something brighter. Derek shook his head, muttering curses, dragging boots like chains. Ash's tail curled close, wrapping around him as if building walls against cruelty. The rain outside softened, whispering promises no one here could hear. From the vent, the kitten's eyes shone faintly, catching the trembling glow of the bulb. Ash edged closer, nose almost pressed to cold mesh, exchanging silent breath. Peanut whispered a broken mew, and Ash answered with stillness deeper than words. Derek said, "Both of you will rot," voice soaked in disdain as he slammed the counter. Ash blinked slowly, sending reassurance only the tiny one would understand. Peanut's shadow wavered in the vent, fragile but unbroken. The air thickened with the mingling of two lives pressed together by bars and steel. Derek left the room, slamming the door, leaving silence that felt almost merciful. Ash held position, his chest rising with purpose he had nearly lost. From the corner, an older voice rose, gravel carried in every sigh. Max said, "Don't waste your strength on bars," his tone rough but seasoned. Ash turned, seeing the elder stray framed in the adjacent cage, fur streaked silver with time. Max said, "Save it for the moment that matters." Derek sneered, "Shut it, old mutt," and rattled the bars for spite. Max didn't flinch, his calm steadying like stones in a river. Ash leaned against his own cage, listening, as if the words could stitch strength into bone. Max said, "Pain doesn't break you. It teaches you how to survive." The room thickened with truth, and Ash carried it into his heart. Night crept in again, cloaking the garage in shadows that whispered memory. Ash lay against the bars, shoulder brushing iron, ear torn but alert. Peanut's faint voice hummed through the vent, offering fragile companionship. Max whispered, "Hold fast," his words trailing into silence. Derek said, "You're nothing but trouble," before shutting off the bulb, leaving only the sound of dripping rain. Darkness pressed close, but it carried warmth too. Ash's breath steady. Peanut's hope, Max's wisdom. In that hidden exchange, a bond began, stronger than the walls meant to contain it. Ash closed his eyes, surrendering to a quiet dream of tomorrow. The morning storm had left the air sharp and bitter, but inside the garage the heat of cruelty remained. Derek shouted, "Move, useless thing," as he kicked the cage hard enough to rattle bones. Ash pressed against the corner, fur bristling but eyes locked with steady defiance. Peanut whimpered from the vent and Max growled low, a warning older than both. Derek sneered, "One more sound and I'll end it." Ash's tail curled tight around his paws, steadying the shaking that betrayed him. Hunger tore at his belly, louder than the echo of steel against concrete. Derek slammed a bucket, the clang bouncing like thunder off the walls. Ash blinked slowly, sending courage toward the vent, a vow carved in silence. Ash lunged forward, wrapping himself around Peanut's small form as Derek's hand shoved through the bars. Peanut squealed, fragile body trembling, but Ash growled deep, a sound scraped from his core. Derek snarled, ungrateful beast, trying to pry them apart. Max barked once, the sound booming like a drum in a dead hall. Ash tightened his hold, refusing to release the tiny hope pressed against his chest. Derek yanked back, leaving scratches in the air, anger curdling his face. Peanut buried his head into Ash's fur, trembling like a leaf clinging to the branch. Ash's eyes blazed, daring Derek to strike again. Derek cursed and stomped away, muttering threats drowned by the thunder outside. Ash waited until Derek left, then pushed harder at the bar he had studied for days. His shoulder ached, blood from his earlier attempt still dried into rust. Max said, "Patience breaks locks more than force," voice calm but strained. Ash snarled softly, refusing to stop, the sound half plea, half promise. Peanut whispered with another mew, and Ash shoved with claws sparking faint against steel. The latch bent slightly, squealing like it remembered freedom. Ash paused, panting, every breath scraping ribs. Derek's footsteps echoed again, and Ash recoiled, tucking himself back into shadows. Max sighed, "Tomorrow will come, little one." The day dragged on with hunger biting deeper than Derek's cruelty. Derek threw down a crust of bread, laughing when Ash sniffed but turned away. Derek said, "Starve then? See if I care," his laughter fading into television noise. Ash laid down, eyes half closed, but his ears remained sharp. Peanut whimpered, pressing nose to vent, as if offering comfort. Max rumbled softly, "Endure, little ones," the sound heavy but steady. Ash exhaled slow, allowing exhaustion to slip through his frame. Shadows grew longer as evening crawled in, carrying whispers of rain returning. Derek's boots echoed down the hallway, leaving silence soaked in despair. The shelter doors opened briefly that night, a rare sound pulling Ash's head up. Voices carried in, people murmuring about adoptions, their shoes wet from rain. Derek said, "Ignore the scrappy ones," his tone dismissive, echoing like a slammed book. Ash pressed to the bars, eyes pleading, but no glance met him. Peanut cried out, a fragile mew that cut the silence, but still no one looked. Max whispered, "They don't see us yet," his words like stone against water. Ash sagged back, hope dimming under fluorescent glare. The footsteps faded, the door closed, and emptiness filled the room again. Ash curled around silence, but his eyes refused to close. The door opened and light sliced across the garage, sharper than any dawn before. Clara stepped in, her face softened by empathy sharpened through years of loss. Derek muttered, "Don't waste time here," with irritation heavy in his voice. Ash lifted his head, eyes locking onto Clara's gaze, and the air shifted. Clara said, "This one has seen too much," voice low but steady, carrying compassion like a torch. Peanut squeaked from the vent, drawing Clara's eyes toward the sound. Max rumbled deep, steadying the fragile silence with strength. Derek barked, "They're broken, not worth saving," but Clara crouched, ignoring him. Ash's breath quickened, heart racing with the possibility that someone finally saw him. Clara leaned closer, her hand hovering just outside the cage bars. Ash flinched but didn't retreat, eyes wide with both fear and longing. Clara whispered, "You've survived more than anyone knows." Derek scoffed, "He's nothing but scars." Ash pressed forward, showing his torn ear like a badge carved by time. Clara frowned, sadness pulling at her face as she said, "Scars mean he fought to live." Derek rolled his eyes, muttering curses, kicking a bucket into shadow. Max exhaled. Truth finds its voice, his wisdom echoing in silence. Ash blinked slowly, sending trust he wasn't sure he still carried. Clara rose to full height, turning her gaze on Derek with steel behind her softness. Clara said, "I'll take him," words cutting clean as glass. Derek barked, "Not a chance," gripping keys tight, jaw clenched. Ash watched, tail twitching, body tensed as if the choice decided his fate. Peanut cried out again, his small voice piercing the stale air. Clara said, "You are hiding more than cruelty here," suspicion clear in her eyes. Derek snarled, "You don't know a thing about this house." Max growled, voice steady, "She sees what matters." Clara's resolve deepened, her stance unshaken. Ash pressed close to the bars, ready to trust the moment. Max shifted, his tired eyes catching Clara's, wisdom radiating from years of survival. Max said, "Strength comes not from fighting, but from enduring until the right eyes find you." Clara's lips parted as if she heard the message carried in silence. Derek spat, "Old Mutt's good as dead," but Clara didn't look away. Ash blinked, watching Clara with a trust blooming like fragile flame. Clara whispered, "You're not broken, you've just been waiting." Derek muttered curses, pacing as though cornered by truth. Peanut pressed nose harder to vent, his tiny sound desperate. Clara's hand hovered steady, bridging the gap between suffering and salvation. As Clara studied Ash's scar, she saw not just wounds but the story of survival etched into him. Clara whispered, "Someone once loved you, didn't they?" Ash blinked, eyes clouded with memory and pain. Derek snapped, "Enough," slamming his fist against the doorframe, making the bulbs shiver. Max growled, steady as thunder under earth. Peanut mewed, fragile sound striking deeper than anger ever could. Clara straightened, her eyes bright with revelation, voice unwavering as she said, "He wasn't abandoned, he was betrayed." Silence dropped heavy, and Derek looked away, for the first time shifting in shame. Ash exhaled slowly, his heart daring to believe a new truth had arrived. The garage pulsed with tension as Clara faced Derek head-on. Clara said, "I'm not leaving without him," her voice sharp as broken glass. Derek sneered, "This is my property," gripping the keys like weapons. Ash pressed against the cage, his body quivering, but eyes locked on Clara. Peanut mewed, fragile but unyielding, his tiny sound echoing louder than fists. Max barked once, a thunderous warning that filled the silence with power. Derek spat, "You'll regret crossing me," but Clara did not flinch. Ash's claws scraped the floor, his heart racing with every breath. The storm outside cracked lightning, as if nature itself demanded justice. Clara pulled a paper from her bag, the edges damp with rain, her hand steady. Clara said, "I have legal authority to take them." Derek's face drained, anger burning hotter as truth struck. Ash's ears perked, tail twitching, sensing change in the air. Derek growled, "Paper means nothing in my house," stepping closer, shadow rising like a wall. Max growled deep, a warning pulled from years of survival. Peanut cried, his tiny voice ringing like a bell of defiance. Clara lifted her chin, eyes sharp with steel. She said, "You've already lost. The law is stronger than cruelty." Silence snapped taut as the storm raged louder. Derek lunged, slamming his fist against the bars, making Ash flinch but not retreat. Clara shouted, "Stop," her voice shaking the room. Derek snarled, "This is mine," spittle flying as rage consumed him. Ash leapt forward, shielding Peanut, as Derek tried to reach through the bars. Peanut squealed, his body trembling but shielded by Ash's fur. Max barked, teeth flashing through steel, sound fierce and sharp. Clara pushed Derek back, fire burning in her eyes. Ash's eyes blazed too, fierce defiance rising higher than fear. The storm rattled the roof, thunder rolling like judgment above them. Max pushed forward against his cage, the metal groaning, his eyes locked on Derek. Max said, "Sometimes freedom demands sacrifice," his voice firm with unshaken wisdom. Derek cursed, "Shut that beast up," slamming his boot against the bars. Clara shouted, "Enough!" her voice cutting through chaos like a blade. Ash pressed closer to Peanut, his body shielding hope itself. Max growled, then threw himself against the cage again, bars bending under strain. Derek staggered back, startled by the sudden force. Clara stepped forward, seizing the moment, determination bright in her gaze. Ash's heart thumped with fear and awe, knowing the elder was giving everything. The moment broke as Derek stumbled, his grip on the keys loosening. Clara snatched them, her hand steady as steel. Derek shouted, "You'll regret this," his voice cracking under the storm's roar. Clara said, "No, they'll live," her words clear as thunder's strike. Ash pressed against the bars, eyes wide with the spark of hope rising. Peanut squealed, his small sound filled with relief. Max sank back, his breath heavy, body weary but eyes proud. Derek slammed the door frame one last time, retreating with rage boiling into silence. Clara held the keys tight, the promise of freedom finally within reach. The door creaked open to a gentler world as Clara carried Ash in her arms. The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed in silver morning light. Clara whispered, "You're safe now," her breath trembling with relief. Ash pressed against her chest, his body rigid, but his eyes wide with wonder. Peanut mewed softly from the carrier. Clara held, his tiny sound filling the silence with fragile hope. Max's absence echoed heavy, yet his wisdom lingered in Ash's steady gaze. Clara stepped into her small home, warmth rising from wood and soft fabric. Ash sniffed the air, scenting safety for the first time in years. Clara smiled faintly, whispering, "Welcome home." Ash crouched low, stepping out of Clara's arms onto a rug soft beneath his paws. His eyes darted from couch to window, tail twitching with unease. Clara said, "Take your time," her voice gentle as falling rain. Peanut chirped from the carrier, urging Ash forward with a fragile call. Ash crept further, whiskers twitching as he sniffed the air of a home filled with kindness. The smell of food drifted from a bowl nearby, and Ash paused, hunger stirring. Clara placed it closer, whispering, "This is for you." Ash bent his head, tasting safety for the first time. Peanut stumbled from the carrier, paws unsteady on polished wood. Ash patted over quickly, pressing his body beside the tiny one, tail wrapping gently. Clara said, "You two belong together," her eyes glistening with warmth. Peanut mewed, nuzzling against Ash, finding courage in the older cat's strength. Ash blinked slow, a promise whispered without words. Clara placed a second small bowl, careful, as if placing a gift of trust. Peanut lapped, trembling, but Ash guarded him fiercely, eyes fixed on the door as if expecting Derek's shadow. Clara whispered, "No one will hurt you here." Clara sat on the couch, exhaustion on her face, but eyes full of tenderness. Ash leapt up cautiously, landing beside her with silent grace. Clara said, "It's all right," as she extended her hand slowly. Ash sniffed, tail twitching, then pressed his head lightly against her fingers. Clara exhaled, her shoulders loosening as if a weight had lifted. Peanut curled on a blanket at Clara's feet, finally purring softly, the sound fragile but steady. Ash blinked slow, trust blooming fragile, yet real. Clara whispered, "You're safe, both of you." As the sun dipped low, casting amber light across the room, Ash lay stretched across the couch. Peanut nestled against his chest, their breaths sensing in fragile harmony. Clara sat nearby, her hand resting lightly on the cushion, a quiet guardian. Clara whispered, "You're home now," the words filling the silence like a song. Ash's eyes closed slowly, ears finally relaxed, heart unclenching from years of fear. Peanut purred louder, hope carried on every small vibration. Outside, the street glowed with peace, the storm only memory. Inside, healing had begun, stitched by trust and love. The night was calm, and Clara's home glowed with the soft hum of safety. Ash curled on a blanket, his scarred ear twitching gently as sleep wrapped him. Peanut nestled against his chest, purring steady as a heartbeat. Clara whispered, "Rest easy, you're safe," her voice carrying gratitude and peace. The air was heavy with warmth, the storm only a fading memory beyond the walls. Ash's breaths deepened, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm of hard-won trust. Peanut's tiny paws shifted as he dreamed, comfort found where once there was fear. Clara leaned closer, brushing Ash's fur gently, her touch filled with tenderness. Clara whispered, "You fought so hard," as tears glimmered in her eyes. Ash blinked slowly, meeting her gaze with quiet acknowledgement. Peanut stretched his small body, pressing closer, finding safety and warmth. Clara's heart swelled, the weight of rescue replaced by the beauty of healing. The house creaked softly, but inside it was filled with silence rich in comfort. Ash tucked his head against Peanut, his tail curling protectively, sealing a promise without words. The window framed the evening sky, painted in deep orange and purple hues. Ash raised his head, gazing at the horizon, as though seeing freedom for the first time. Clara whispered, "No more cages," her words steady like a vow. Peanut mewed softly, echoing the feeling with innocence. The golden light washed across the room, turning scars into symbols of survival. Ash blinked, his eyes reflecting the glow, his heart daring to believe in tomorrow. Clara rested her hand over her chest, holding the moment as if it were sacred. Clara lit a candle on the table, flame flickering like a fragile promise of peace. Ash lay nearby, his body stretched comfortably, eyes half closed in serenity. Peanut purred against his side, warmth radiating in small pulses of joy. Clara whispered, "This home is yours now," her voice steady and soft. Ash's whiskers twitched as if he understood, leaning closer to the flame's glow. The candlelight painted the room in amber, shadows dancing but no longer threatening. Together, they sat in quiet communion, the weight of cruelty replaced with healing silence. The night deepened, but peace lingered like a song woven into the walls. Ash lifted his head once more, his eyes locking with Clara's. Clara whispered, "Thank you for surviving," her words breaking softly but filled with love. Ash blinked, slow and steady, sealing a bond stronger than cruelty. Peanut stirred, pressing into Ash's chest, his tiny sound humming like gratitude. Clara leaned back, her tears finally falling, but they carried joy, not sorrow. Ash closed his eyes, his body finally surrendering to trust, scars resting in peace. Together, they lay beneath the gentle glow of love that would last.